If you don't mind, put your name in the chat, and that way I can give you participation points if you don't mind, and the recording will pick it up. So that'll help out. So I appreciate it. So you guys we finished up informal assessments. For the most part, everyone's assessment report looked really good. So some of them I provided some feedback on if you were missing some areas. So um, we'll have a couple additional areas that we're going to add to our next report, but we're going to spend most of tonight talking about norm reference assessment, a little bit about what it entails. So norm reference assessments fall under formal assessments, what we call formal assessments. Formal assessments are often used for accountability purposes. It's also called high stakes testing. So when we look at that, and we consider formalized testing, that would include standardized test, which is what we give a lot of times for um, state test in public schools. Criterion reference test is considered formalized, but it differs somewhat from what we're going to focus on this week, which is norm referenced. Criterion reference measures or compares a student against his or her own ability. It's basically checking to see their overall growth and achievement amongst themselves. And most of those scores are reported in percentages, 70% or 80%. When we get into norm reference, the difference is it's taking that individual student and comparing his or her performance to a very large group of students that are very similar in age and very similar in grade level, very similar in demographics. Okay. And we oftentimes see those scores reported as stay-nine scores, percentile ranks, standard score. Um, we're going to see percentages a lot, not just 70%, but 70th percentile. They scored at the 65 or 65th percentile. That tells us that the students scored as good, if not better, than 65% of the students that took this same test. So it's comparing that student against a large group. Achievement tests, oftentimes too, we see those in schools when state testing, and then aptitude tests. That's usually very common when they are maybe applying for technical trade schools, whether it's career tech system or if they're going into the military service. Aptitude test, ASVAB, is a very common aptitude test. It often reports the student strengths in various areas to determine what pathway or types of training are best suited to their interest and their overall academic abilities. So just kind of want to go over those items quickly for formal tests. But under formal, we're going to concentrate on norm reference test, which I'm going to get down to slide deck really quick. So weeks 4 and 5, the way the course shell's set up are kind of combined together. We're going to focus on this week 4. We're going to come back and revisit it for week 5. So after tonight, we're going to kind of get the ball rolling on acquiring your data for norm reference assessment. One thing I want to share straight up with norm reference tests and let you know from the get-go, a majority of your norm reference assessments that are used in a school system require that individuals have advanced training. Okay. And that advanced training is usually completing a master's program in school psychometry or school psychology. Okay. To be able to administer those, you have to have some specialized training. Most of the programs are graduate level that anywhere from 33 to 36 hours with a practicum along with it. You learn how to administer a wide variety of them. Last week, I kind of shared that, and it came out when we talked about some things you learned from your interviews, and one of you commented, "Hey, the person I interviewed told me that there are multiple assessments out there on the market that you can buy. and use when you're testing students. So we have to learn how to use and administer a lot of those. There are strict protocols, guidelines that we have to follow. If we veer from that, it will affect the outcome. We don't get a true reading of that student's overall ability. So we have to really follow the guidelines with norm reference. So sometimes that does create a challenge for this assignment, which I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about tonight on ways that you can meet the requirements for this assignment. Many of you may work in a small district or smaller that does not employ a full-time school psychologist or school psychometrist. Your smaller districts tend to contract that out, so they just come in on an as-needed basis. If you work in a district that is smaller and a district does not employ that person full-time, I have an option for you to help you complete this assignment. I have a recording. It's called Testing Lab Video. It's in the course shell. And it's a recording of me actually giving the WJ4 as part of a reevaluation for a high school student. You could watch the video. I will provide you with the comprehensive report that has all the data, and you can pull that data to help formulate your report if you don't have access to a qualified examiner. If you are fortunate enough to work in a district that employs that professional that's qualified to give the norm reference assessments, would encourage you to collaborate with them, work with them, ask them, hey, could I come in and maybe observe you administering that, and then sit down with you and obtain some of the data for the purpose of completing this assignment. Okay. Um, the norm reference assessment, I'm going to go over some of the characteristics of it. How they are basically constructed, what it all entails. Okay, it's a very complex process when they put these together. So when it is decided that an assessment is going to be created for a specific domain, they go in, the test creators, they go in and they create what's called item pools of questions, and they arrange those in sequence from the least difficult to the most difficult. And so if I were coming in and I'm giving one of these assessments, the first level of questions that the student is presented with are questions on a level to where that student can be successful. And then as they continue to score correctly and advance, the level of difficulty increases. Okay. Also, when they are developing these assessments, there is a what they call a developmental version, and then they are field tested with a small sample. And then they go back in and review that and determine reliability and validity. So a lot of this is done behind the scenes before it's even officially released out on the market. Okay. They make multiple revisions and then they go and field test again with a larger sample, go through that process. Okay, so that's kind of how they're formulated. So it may be in development stages for a couple years before it's even released and published for production to where we can buy that and actually use it in the field. Okay, what is a norm reference test? Basically, it's an assessment or a test that allows us to compare the performance of one student with the average performance of other students who are of the same age and grade, which is basically pretty much the same thing I told you when kind of opened and started class. So I'm coming in, Rebecca, and I'm testing a fourth grade student. You might be a fourth grade teacher. I'm testing one of the students. And so I like to use the WJ4. That's kind of my go-to, my preference. And that is normed, and it will be compare your fourth grade student to a large norm group of students who are the same age and grade, very similar. Okay. The norm group that's been developed in the development stages of making those tests is basically the sample. It's a group of diverse students. So that group that the student's going to be compared to is very diverse linguistically, as far as their disabilities and their cultural background. The norm group basically sets the average performance of the assessment. Okay. So one of the scores that I get, Rebecca, is it will tell me based on your student's age and grade level what they're expected to score. That's one score that I'm going to get. It's going to show me what they're expected to score. Then it's going to compare it to their actual score. So let's say I come in and it's September, and so Johnny in your class is fourth grade, second month. And based on uh, his information, it's projecting that he should score anywhere from a 3.8 to a 4.2. Third grade, eighth month, fourth grade, second month. But his actual score on that subtest might be second grade, third month. That's his actual score, what he did. And so we go in and compare his predicted score versus his actual score, and we start looking to see how much of a discrepancy there is. And that will tell us if it's a big enough discrepancy that he has obviously a learning gap with that skill. Okay. The norm group is going to be representative of the students who will later be assessed, and also students who are later assessed should be similar in background, age, or grade. Okay. So they try to keep that consistent, that norm group that it's comparing it to. Here it gets into some terminology, which is a little bit more advanced for this class, but it kind of gives you just some terminology, just some basic understanding. So when those test developers are making these complex exams, assessments, they obtain average expected scores for each month. Okay. So it looks at each month of that student's age. Okay, so they take the existing data and they put it into smaller units to establish what we call developmental scores, and that's done with a decimal. So fourth grade, so it'll say 4.2. Fourth grade, second month. Okay, or fourth grade, fourth month. Fifth grade, third month. Okay, it's going to give a developmental score based on grade level. It will also do it based on age. So instead of fourth grade, third month, it may say 8 years, 4 months. So it'll give it to me both ways. It'll give me their age expectancy and their grade expectancy. So it's going to show me additional scores out there. Johnny might have scored on the fourth grade second month, and there's age equivalency exam score. It might have been 8 years, 4 months. Okay, so it gives us a multitude of different scores out there to compare. Scores might also be divided into their chronological age, okay, which is basically just what I went over. So the student's age is going to be expressed in years, months, and days. So the header of the report, and I don't know how many of you guys have actually seen a comprehensive report, the header at the top is going to have the student information. It's going to have their age, their date of birth, and then it's going to give me what's called the chronological age, the day of that test. And so the day of the test, Johnny might be 12 years, 4 months, and 28 days old. Okay, that is what we call the chronological age. All right, so you'll see that on all the reports. So if you're ever in a MEGS meeting and that examiner comes in to present that data, they will talk about chronological age, and you'll hear them say at the day of the test, the student was 10 years, 3 months, and 28 days old. Okay, they got it right down to the day. Steps in administering norm reference test. When I kind of opened up the Zoom session, I talked about, hey, there are strict protocols we have to follow. I can't come in just willy-nilly and start administering a test and giving the student hints, or in my responses to them, my voice reflection sends a message that you're on the right track or no, you're not. I mean, I have to be really just very specific, short, and to the point and follow the protocol. If I start veering from that, then at the end of the exam, once I score it, it's not going to be a reliable and valid score. Okay. So there are specific directions and then steps in administering the test. Obviously, I'm going to have practiced that multiple times before I come in there and give it. I'm not just going to pick it up and go do it and not be familiar with it. And then coming in, I want to make sure that I establish a positive testing environment. Just come in, try to get to know the student, try to make them feel at ease so you know that they're going to be comfortable. You want to try to have some familiarity with them, engage in some friendly conversation, maybe explain why we're doing the test, give a little introduction of each subtest that we do, and then try to remain calm and collective through the test and to try to ease that student's mind. Calculating chronological age. Now, this shows you a little chart on how to do it. If you ever get into and you think, hey, I want to go get an advanced degree and I want to be a school psychologist or school psychometrist, the software will do all this for you. But here it kind of gives you an idea if you were to hand calculate it. So each column in the calculation uses a different base. We have a 12 months, 30 days over here. So we have to look at it and it kind of shows some of the math. And we're going to do some borrowing here. And when we borrow, going from months to days, we have to convert it. So we know a month typically is based on 30 days, right? And we have 12 months. So here's an example. I came in, just kind of give you an idea. I came in and it's 2003. It was in the fourth month. It was April the 2nd. Then I record the child's birthday. The child was born in 1994 on the 10th month and the 8th day. I'm going to calculate his chronological age. Okay. So I have to do some borrowing here, right? Obviously. And so I do some borrowing and I'm going to take a month, or a year, and I'm going to add over here and convert it into 12 months because I can't take 10 months from 4. So I'm going to add here, and then I've got to borrow from this 12 to come up with 30 days over here. So I'm going to borrow a month. That gives me 30 days. Okay, so I subtract 30 days or 32 days, subtract 8 from it, gives me day 24. And then I subtract here, and I end up with the 5th month. And after I've borrowed over here, I come up with he's 8 years, 5 months, 24 days old. I'm going to round it to 8.6 for his chronological age. So that's kind of the process for that works. Again, you'll probably never have to do that if you ever get into this. Software scoring will do it for you. We initially come up with a raw score when we're scoring these, okay? It's pretty much what it is. So Rebecca, if there is 30 items on that subtest, when I'm doing my initial scoring, Johnny gets 27 out of 30. I record it as 27 out of 30. Then I'm going to enter it into my software and it's going to go through and norm all that. But we start off with a raw score as they are testing. I have a protocol book and I'm tracking it. And then I add that up and I put my raw score in my test manual. So it's basically the number of items a student answers correctly. The next thing that we do, we talk about are what we call basals and ceilings. I don't know if you guys have heard of this before. I'll give you an explanation. Basal is their starting point, where we're going to start them. The ceiling is where I'm going to have to end the test. And the guidelines, protocols tell me where to start to establish their basal. And then it gives me direction on what the ceiling is. Each subtest I give has a different ceiling and a different basal based on the age of the student. Okay? So let me give you an example. I'm coming in, I'm given a WJ4, and the subtest is going to be math calculation. Students in sixth grade. It's telling me that based on his age, and there are 80 questions to answer, that for his age, I need to start him on item number 30. Okay? So, automatically, problems 1 through 29, I will count as correct. And I mark his starting point at item 30. The protocols are also telling me that the ceiling on this subtest is when the student has scored 5 incorrect answers consecutively. So they missed 5 in a row. Okay. So here's how this can go down for this student. His age tells me I'm starting him on problem 30 of 80. 80 total problems. I'm going to start him at number 30. When I score it, 1 through 29, he automatically gets. Even though he didn't do it, I bypassed it. He starts on item 30. He gets 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. 5 problems right off the bat. Incorrect. I stop the test. It's over. That subtest is over. I mark it down. What would his score be based on his basal and ceilings? Anybody want to take a guess? What would his overall score be that I'm going to log in? He hit his ceiling the first 5 problems, but I start him on number 30. Anybody know what I'm going to score that as when I log it in? Anybody want to take a guess? No, no one wants to. Basically, I'm going to log in 29. Even though he technically didn't do it, 1 through 29, he automatically gets, according to the scoring protocol. I start him on number 30. His first 5 he answered was incorrect. He hit his ceiling. I'm done. I stop the test. I log it as 29 and move on. Now, when that's normed and the way the test has been designed, it's going to recognize that. Okay, it's going to recognize that. Basal and ceiling. Basal is basically your starting point. Ceiling is the point in time when I must end the test. Okay. Different subtests have different ceilings depending on the age of the student. Some ceilings might be 3 in a row. Incorrect. I stop the test. Some might be 5 in a row. Depends. If it's a younger student, the basal, and there's 30 problems, the basal may tell me the starting point is going to be a problem number 5. So 1 through 4, automatically correct. I start them on 5 and advance from there and go until they get 3 incorrect or 4 or 5 or whatever the ceiling is. Does that all make sense to everyone? It's kind of weird on the scoring. You're thinking, man, he didn't even answer 1 through 29, but yet we're going to count them correct. And yes, we do. That's how you do it. Okay. So that's a little bit about basals and ceilings. Here it gives you an example. It may tell you to go off the chronological age, or it may tell you to go off the grades. So it gives you an example here. So starting points. Okay. Student is 6 years, 4 months. Start with item 10. Student is 8th grade, 3rd month. Start with item 50. Okay. Tells me where to start. Then the ceiling will also tell me where I need to end. Typically, it's anywhere from 3 to 5. Ceiling for this might be 3. Ceiling might be 5. It just depends. Okay. Usually when I'm marking, if it's correct, I put a 0 on there. If it's incorrect, I put an X. So if I see 3 X's in a row, that's the ceiling, I stop. If it's 5, I stop. The basal and ceiling might not be the same number. Okay. It could vary by each subtest. Okay. Information on protocol. Basically, the protocol, again, this is kind of giving you just some of the basics, some of the terminology. The protocol basically is the form that I use as an examiner during the administration. That's the form I use for scoring. Zeros, when I mark zero for each item, that means it's correct. If I put an X, it could be incorrect. Also, I could use one or a zero. I could put one, that means it's correct. Zero is incorrect. Either way. Okay. How do we get the best results going in? Just kind of give you an idea, and this will kind of may help you kind of be more aware, especially when you're doing state tests, give you some things to think about. Uh, Students tend to perform better in a setting when with examiners that they are familiar with. Okay. So that would be schools that have a full-time person in there. Unfortunately, not all schools can do it. They may have to contract it out, so they may only see that person when they come in. So that's why it's important for us to try to establish rapport with them and help them feel as comfortable as we can. Okay, we really don't like for them to see us the first time in that testing session. Maybe I can come early and do some observation and meet them and go from there. Another thing is, it's always good to get in and do some observations on them. It may help me see some things and make me aware of before I actually get them in there to test. One thing we always say is don't over test the students. So if it's a younger student, Rebecca, I may have to come in there and split it up into multiple sessions. I don't want to come in there with a little guy that's in first or second grade and keep him in there for 4 hours at one time. That's not going to be good. The results I get, it will not be reflective upon their abilities. So the younger they are, we tend to split them up. I may come in and keep them for an hour, come back the next day, pull them in, keep them for another hour to kind of break it up. Okay. As they get older, they can sit for a little bit longer sessions, try to make them feel at ease, talk a little bit about the importance of the testing so they won't feel over anxious. One thing I mentioned a while ago, I cannot, as an examiner, we cannot reinforce that student's attempts and efforts and not correct responses. We have to be very just straightforward with it. We can't say things to reinforce their effort or get or kind of imply that maybe they are giving incorrect answers. Okay. Sometimes younger students like a tangible reinforcement, done that with candy or something. They work hard, give them a treat, give them extra time on a break. Okay. Here it talks a little bit about reducing biases. We got to be really careful about recognizing sensory or communicative impairments, making sure that doesn't inhibit their ability to perform well on there. We need to make sure that the materials or the method that we are utilizing does not limit students from responding. We need to also make sure that we're aware of their background experiences and does that have some limitations on the student's ability to respond. Um, Making sure that we clearly explain instructions to them, making sure that they are completely understanding to what they're being asked to do. Other types of scores that we get, we mentioned raw scores. Okay. Um, there are some advantages and disadvantages of different derived scores, so it's always important to understand what they are. Some of these you may be hear of more so than others. How many of you guys in your district use STAR reading or math? Anybody use those? It's part of the Renaissance suite. A lot of times we use that for benchmarking purposes. So if you've ever seen a STAR reading score report, it will give you scores in multiple interpretations. And so some of those are listed on here. You may see it listed as a T score. Okay, you may see it listed as a Z score in a percentile rank or an age and equivalent. Standard score, the average is 100. Standard scores are often depicted in a bell curve where 100 is average, it's right in the middle. T score, the average score is 50. A Z score exposes a student standing in standard deviation units. Again, some of these you'll never probably hear of again. We have a Stanine score, so it's divided into 9 segments, has an average of 5 and a standard deviation of 2. Standard score is a common term that you will hear. moving forward. What's their standard score? Standard score is a 145. That's above average, so we know that, okay? Percentile rank, you'll hear this a lot in special education, especially when it comes to testing. His percentile rank is 72, 72nd percentile. The student performed how they performed in relationship to students in that group. They scored as well as, if not better than 72% of the students in the norm group that took that exam. That's what the percentile rank. Age equivalent, I mentioned earlier, it will give me a score based on their age equivalency and grade equivalency. So if I have a student that is 12 years and 4 months and on a subtest, it shows me his score is an age equivalent of 7 months, or 7 years and 6 months. That tells us he scored well below his age expectancy. Okay, that kind of gives you an idea. Same thing with grade equivalency. If I test Susie, the day of the test, she is seventh grade, third month. And on that math subtest, it shows me her grade equivalency score is second grade, second grade, 6th month. That tells me she scored well below grade level on that subtest. So it's another way to look at it and compare. Again, the most common terms that you guys will hear in special education as far as scores is going to be standard score, percentile rank, age equivalent, and grade equivalent. Okay. So kind of remember those. Those will be some that say, hey, I remember Dr. Posey talking about that. So it kind of gives you an idea how they perform. So if you're in there, Rebecca, and you hear that age equivalent report and it's about 3, 4 years below what their age is, that's kind of a red flag right there. Hey, they're well below, or they're 3, 4 years below their expected grade equivalency. Group testing. The norm reference test. We're not going to do it in a group. Okay. Schools often administer group tests when we do standardized or achievement tests, right? High stakes state tests. That's what that is. Norm reference for purpose of testing for special services is going to be one-on-one. Some considerations when looking at testing, make sure that it's logical and it serves the purpose that it was intended. We don't want to just randomly pick some assessment to go in and throw in front of a student thinking that's going to give us some magical answers on whether they're going to qualify. Okay. The various assessments out there were designed for specific reasons. Some were specifically designed to identify autistic students. Some were specifically designed to identify severe and profound categorizations. So we want to make sure we're using the right tool, the right document. These types of assessment, why were they there? Basically, especially high stakes tests, state tests were designed to hold schools accountable for learning. They use that data to come up with your district report card or the state report card. Also, assessments allow all students to show their knowledge and skills on the same challenging content. High quality decision making determines how students participate. Also, accountability determinations are affected in the same way by all students, so it's consistent across the board. Okay. Also, assessment, it gives us an opportunity, whether it's an informal, a norm reference, or a CBM, as instructors, it gives us a way to monitor their progress and provide continuous improvement. And then if we need to provide some additional instruction or training. So high stakes considerations, high stakes tests when it comes to IDEA, special ed law. IDEA tells us that students with disabilities to be included in assessment. I think I mentioned maybe night one talking about assessment and special ed. There is a percentage that we can have take alternative assessments for IDEA purposes, but we have to use some type of assessment to measure accountability. Okay. In special ed law, in the class that I teach there, we did a little case study on this one night, and it talked about um, a particular district that was just basically rubber stamping IEPs. They never changed goals, none of that. Well, over a period of time, the student left the district and they were reassessed and actually had degressed and no data had been collected. I mean, this totally a specific district dropped the ball. And because they were not using measures of accountability, the or I'm sorry, the family pursued legal action on that because they felt like the IP wasn't upheld, IDA wasn't followed, and as a result of that, that family won in due process. And so it ended up being a mess. So we want to make sure that we're using measures of accountability and monitoring those student progress. Also, students under IDA, they can be afforded accommodations. Okay, so we can actually change the format or the response mode or the setting or scheduling, but we cannot alter what the assessment measures. Okay, so there are some things that we can accommodate, but we can't go in and change what the actual assessment is designed to measure. Okay, so accommodation should prevent measuring a student's disability. Okay, so that's kind of a little bit different take on it. 504s. Assessment requirements are met and determined during the IEP and 504 process. So there's some similarities in the process there. The 504 is more of a medical documentation approach versus the IEP, where it's more of an assessment approach to identifying needs. So when you have those meetings, IEP reviews, and if they're in a grade level that uh, is being tested, those discussions need to take place when you do your IEP reviews, determine what type of assessment that student is going to participate in. So when we look at high stakes tests, I talked about a while ago, alternative assessments. So there is a 1% cap on the number of students who can take alternative assessments. That is all going to be determined and worked out with your administration, your special education director. That's kind of their role to monitor and keep a handle on that. But just know there's a 1% cap of students who may take some type of alternative assessment. That could include a portfolio, performance-based, authentic, and also observations. Okay, so remember that. And again, your administration and special ed director will help guide you on that. That's not going to be just left up to you. I'm gonna scan down here because there's a few slides that really don't pertain to what we're talking about. The last two really don't. So I'm gonna do get out of that slide deck, and I kind of want to go to looking at this particular assessment, kind of what we're going to be looking at. I want to pull up the syllabus so you kind of know some things. Start thinking ahead. Remember, you got this week and all of next week for this, but I just kind of want to go over it and share with you some things. There's going to be a couple different sections in here, so let me scroll down to where I need to be. Okay, now let's talk about some different types of norm reference assessment. Your district might use what's called considered a norm reference assessment within the district that you just didn't realize. I don't know how many of your districts may use MAP testing. Does that sound familiar to any of you? MAP testing, those are often given 3 times a year at each grade level for benchmarking purposes, usually within about the first month of school. They do the first one. They'll come back either right before students go on Christmas break or right after they come back from Christmas break and give the second one. Excuse me. And then they'll often do it in the spring. Okay. And so it's a method of benchmarking collecting a lot of data and monitoring. And then if your district does it consistently year after year, that data follows that student. So it's very easy to track growth. And it's also easy to check or identify learning discrepancies and learning gaps. Okay. That is a norm reference test because it provides scores using standard scores, percentile ranks, grade equivalencies. It provides all those. So if your district does that, you might work with your building level principal to see if you can review your case study student you're using, his or her map growth assessment results. That's one. Star reading and math is another that I mentioned a while ago. A lot of schools, that's a popular benchmarking assessment. It is considered norm reference because it provides percentile ranks and it compares that student score to a normed group. So there are a couple examples there that your districts might be using. So you might want to check with them and see if they utilize those assessments for those benchmarking purposes. As I mentioned at the beginning of class, a lot of your norm reference assessments require additional qualifications and certifications to do that, to be able to administer them. So that's why I was planting that seed for you to start thinking about, hey, does our district employ someone full time that's qualified examiner, school psychologist, school psychometrist, or are we small enough we have to contract that out? So something you need to check in on your district to see if those individuals are there where you can collaborate with them and maybe do an observation of them administering that. If you work in a district that is smaller and they don't employ a person that has the qualifications to do that, I'm going to show you in just a moment where that video is in the comprehensive report after I go over a couple of these areas on the syllabus. Okay, I'll show you where you can find that if you already know, hey, I'm going to use that video. I know I will. We don't have anyone qualified in our district. This test is going to be set up very similar to the one you just did for informal as far as how to format it. We're going to have our section for identifying information. So you would name what type of norm reference assessment you're utilizing, when the date it was administered, the skills that it measures, kind of purpose of the test, the background of the student. If you're using the same case study student as you did on the informal, you can literally copy that section and use the same background section. There's no need to redo it if it is the same student. Okay, you can use this same background section for this new report. If not, make sure you identify these areas: pseudonym, the grade level, a little bit about their background, any teacher observation information, anything about their family, or any other relevant information. Test results and interpretation. We're going to have a new item here to put in with our tables, charts, and graphs. Remember, each one of these assessment reports, we're going to display data using visual representations, a table, chart, or graph. Okay. Here, it specifically talks about it using those tables, the visual representations. That's worth 9 points right there. And then going and analyzing or describing the data, giving a explanation of the data in there. Now, one thing that's new is right here in this section. We're asking you to incorporate a bell curve to display the scores where the student scores would land in a bell curve. And it also provides you the opportunity to explain the student performance in comparison to their peers. So on a bell curve, most bell curves, your standard score 100 is in the middle. It's the mean, right in the middle. Everything to the right, as the scores go up, that's positive. Anything to the left, we start getting below average. Okay. So I have a template that you literally can plug your scores in the bell curve and it will plot them for you, and you can copy that and paste it right into your report. Okay, and I'll show you where to find that. Okay, that's one of the new things we're asking you to incorporate and learn how to utilize in addition to these tables, charts up here, and graphs. Okay, support any conclusion that you write in there based off the data. So if you conclude that little Johnny is uh, showing academic deficiencies in these specific areas, you can point it or reference it to the data that's up there. Make sure you identify what you feel like are some strengths of this student based on his or her scores, and then what you feel like are some weaknesses based on his or her scores. Summary and conclusion section, very much like what you did in the informal. You're just kind of tying up some of your key findings and giving just a little summary of their overall performance. And then any recommendation, basically giving some recommendations based on the scores for some instructional planning moving forward. So based on the data that you see, what would you recommend for instructional purposes based on those scores? Okay, for some activities in the classroom, would you modify the grade level content to change up the material? What would be some things you would do? All right, and that would be your last section. Now, just want to clarify because I know I had a couple questions on this on the informal. For each one of these assessment reports, we're going to use that lesson plan template to do that lesson plan based on that data for this report. So we're not wanting to pull data from the informal for this lesson plan. We're going to do this lesson plan based on the data of the norm reference test that you're going to use. All right. Also, make sure you include the permission form with that as well, especially if it's a different student. You definitely need to get permission form. But if it's the same student, just add in the norm reference on one of those lines and then attach it and include it in this, even if it's the same student. Okay. Is there any questions on that? Just kind of wanted
And
to go over it, and I'll go over it again next week, but I just kind of wanted to give you an overview and an idea. Season, do you have a question?
yeah, so if we have to use the student in your video,
Yes.
do we just not put the permission part in there?
No, what you will do is just take the permission form, a blank one, and put for the assessment, just put WJ4 video per Dr. Posey and attach that. That's all you got to do so you can get the points for it, okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank
Any
you.
other,
Thank
any
you,
other?
Susan, for that. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Thank you.
Yeah,
I had that
no.
same question. So thank you. I appreciate
Okay,
that.
yeah. Yeah, just take the blank form and on the norm reference, just it's the WJ4 is what I use. Just put WJ4 video per Dr. Posey and attach that to your report and you'll get the points for it on that because that's all tied in down here and connected to the organization mechanics section right here. So just do that and that way I know you use the video. Okay. Also, in that video, just use the you'll see the comprehensive report. It actually has a student's name. I had full permission from the parent. They knew I was using it for this class. The young man's parent was actually one of my employees in that district, and so I had full permission to use it for use in this class. So I mean, you can put KG on there. His name's Caden Gripe. You can put KG in the report when you're writing it. Okay. Before I switch over to show you an example of the assessment report and also where to find the video and the comprehensive report that's got all the data in it for the video. Any other question before I switch screens and get to it? Again, I'm going to go over a lot of this next week. I know it's a lot of information tonight, but I just kind of wanted to show you where it's at. Okay, I'm going to switch out of here quickly and I'll go back down. Okay, The comprehensive report, if you use my video, is in this week's. It'll say week 4 and 5. You click on this folder here, and you will see it drops down, and you're going to see it says formal assessments, the slide deck I just went over with you. It's got a couple links to some articles on differences between norm reference and criterion reference. Next week, I will go over this psychoeducational testing, kind of what the report has. And then we're going to get down to where it says comprehensive report. Okay. This is what a comprehensive report looks like after I've came in and evaluated a student. Okay. It's very lengthy. Some of these can be up 20 plus pages. Okay. I kind of cut this one down a little bit so it can just take you right to the pertinent information. Okay. Data testing, I put that in. The software remembers it, so it calculates his chronological age. Okay. His grade level at that time, 11.9. So actually school had just been out. We were starting the summer. They came up, met with me so I could do the video and do his reevaluation. Here are the tests I administered. The reason for the referral, you can see right here. I listed it. Student was a volunteer participant helping meet the requirements for this assessment class. Parent was well aware of it. Plus, I got them the data. This young man was going to go in the military and they wanted an updated report on him. And so we just took care of it at the same time. Background information, all this. So if you ever get to look at one of these, this is kind of how they're laid out. Testception observation. I include my observations, how he performed, his behaviors, his actions on each of the tests. Here's where we get down into the data. Assessment results and interpretation. This section here is basically, just so you know, it is a written narrative of all the statistical information that's in the second half of this report. So I provide the information to them in narrative form, and I also provide it to them in a statistical form where they'll see a lot of numbers, and I'll show you in just a minute. You'll notice here there's a section on intellectual abilities, and you're going to see percentile ranks. That's how you know it's a norm reference test. Talks about percentages, percentile ranks. Percentile rank of 52. Okay, and it shows it's in the average range. It means he scored as well, if not better, than 52% of the people taking that exact test. Okay, so again, this is all the narrative form of the results. You can see there's a lot of information, right? But I want to get you down to where all the statistical information is, too, as well. Also did an adaptive behavior on him. I used the Vinland 3. Okay, so it includes that information. Okay, now here's where we get into all the statistical information. So you can see the whole first part of this is all a narrative description of how he performed in these sections here where you see all the numbers. Now, I mentioned a while ago, it provides me a lot of things. You see GE, that's his grade equivalency, how he scored. Okay. RPI, we're not going to really worry about that for the purpose of this class. That's getting into some more advanced stuff. The proficiency, it tells me where this student scored when we plugged it in on like a bell curve. So he scored within what we consider to be the average range. His standard score was a 96. Okay, told you 100 is square in the middle of a bell curve. So he was just right there in the middle. So it was within the average range. PR, percentile rank, 39. 39 percentile. That's where he ranked percentile. His standard score classification again was in the average range, which correlates with his proficiency range. You will see some down here on all the subtests. You can see here he was average to advanced in number series. Okay. He scored very high. He was 107 standard score. It was in the average to advanced range. You can see some on down maybe where he was limited. His letter pattern matching skills were limited. Remember, this student was 11.9, a junior, finishing up his junior year. Grade equivalency there. I'm hovering my mouse over it. You can see it. He scored a seventh grade. Okay. A little low, weak area. So the scores up here are on the cognitive. I give a cognitive assessment. These are all the subtests. The second one is the achievement. The difference between the two, most of the subtests down here on the achievement are timed. I give a set of directions. They have a specific amount of time for that particular subtest. So there's minimal interaction between me and the student when I give the achievement. The video recording shows me administering the cognitive portion because there's interaction between me and that student. There's some give and take, some interaction. I ask questions, I guide them through following the protocols on what I can do and what I can't, but there's more interaction. That's what I recorded. That portion shows the cognitive. I didn't record the achievement because you would have been bored out of your mind. I give directions and then would sit there and watch a student work and time them. Okay. Again, this is set up the same. His reading. This student, just to kind of give you an idea, he could read anything you put in front of his face. His fluency rates were high. You can see high average on a lot of these scores. Very superior on oral reading. So his ability to read orally and fluently was very good. But when it came down time to reading recall, limited. He couldn't remember anything. His comprehension skills were low. You can see very low, 71. When it gets down in the 70s, red flags coming up. Tells you there's a major discrepancy there. Again, he could read anything you put in front of him. His fluency was great, and his rate at which he read was very good, but he couldn't recall the information. You can see these scores here. His basic reading skills were well above. Grade equivalency, 17. That's post high school. Okay. Just kind of give you an idea on grade equivalency. So this is where all the data is. This is where I go in and analyze and look for severe discrepancies in skill sets on where they should score, how they scored. You can see it gives me ideas. They're advanced, average, limited. Math calculation. That is a time test. They only have a couple minutes and they got multiple problems to answer. So when he had to work under a timed format and recall the information, he struggled. But if it wasn't timed and he had time to process those recall skills on math facts and he had time to do it, he was fine. Okay. On down, it gives me more data to point out to the parents. It tells me here his visualization skills. There is a significant discrepancy, -2 standard deviations below. Right here, that's what that is at -2.02. If you see more than one standard deviation, if it's more than one below, it's identified as a weakness. Okay, so that's kind of how we tell. If it's more than one above the standard deviation, it identifies it as a strength. So you can see his fluency was a strength. Basic reading skills was a strength. Applied letter word identification, a strength. He had strong phonetic skills, and that's what that is, letter word identification. His oral reading, which I told you up there above when we're looking at the numerical scores, was a strength, and it shows it down here. His oral reading. Reading recall, guess what? It shows me down here in a different format. I already told you that was a weakness of his based on the numbers and looking at them, and it shows me down here he was 2 standard deviations below. It's a weakness. So when we start seeing the discrepancies, it pops up here. Okay. Those were some areas that he was served in through his time in school. He made a lot of gains later on. This is a student that was off the charts, ADHD, and then there was a point in time when mom and dad decided to try medication. About middle school, once they got his mind slowed down a little bit and he could focus, he started making strong academic gains, and he had a very strong work ethic, so he could overcompensate some of the weaknesses due to his work ethic. So here it spells it out for us. Significant, either positive or negative. Okay. So it helps us identify. Those are some areas you can pull out and look at. You've got the data. That's where you will find it in this report. Okay. So when you're writing this up, pull out what you feel like are 2 to 3 weak areas and focus on those from that comprehensive report. You don't have to focus on all the weak areas because you'll end up writing a report that's 50 pages long. Okay. Just pick out 2 to 3 areas to focus on. You don't have to hit all the weak areas. I want to show you one more thing quickly before we go. In the SPED 805 resources, I mentioned I went too far up. I mentioned the template for the bell curve. Let me get down here to it, and so you'll know where to find it. And then I will spend some time pulling that up next week and kind of modeling that for you, how to utilize it. But it is basically, it's a Google, taken off of a Google form I had or document. So this is the document. It's going to graph it using this bar graph down here. Okay. So the test that the specific, if you use my video, you would list the specific subtest. You might put math calculations, letter naming fluency. What was their standard score? So you're going to put it here, and it's going to indicate it here and chart it for you. So you can see the standard score right in the middle on this bell curve. They were above average. Okay. Their scaled score was 12. Okay. So you'll plug them in. You could put math. I'm just going to put math facts fluency. Their standard score was, I'm just going to put 54. Okay. It's way over here. It's way low. Okay. If their standard score is a 54, we're well below 70, guys. When you see scores below 70, that's ID range. Okay. That standard score might have been a 132. Hypothetically, I'm just throwing that out there. You can see where they scored then. It graphed it for you. And so literally after you get your scores in there, you can go in and copy this and then drop it over in your document. Okay. And that's in the course shell. So I just wanted to share that with you. I will go over that again next week and show you. I just want to make sure you were aware of it and where to find it. Okay. Any questions on norm reference? I'm going to do one more thing. I want to show you real quick. I forgot. I apologize. I want to show you in the 805 resources. My bad. Is in the 805 resources, here's the video. It's labeled SPED 805 Testing Lab Video. So if you have to use my video, that's where it's at. It's a YouTube link that's embedded, and you would start. It's 25 minutes. You can start, and it'll pop up, and it'll show me in a room starting to test a young man. You guys are blocking it. So I got you guys. Can you see it on your end? Are you guys with me, or did you freeze up?
No, I can't see anything.
Okay. It's not showing up for you on the screen. I think I have you blocking the view on it. So it's in the 805 resources folder. If you go, like I said, it's 25 minutes. And so literally you can watch it to get an idea of how the whole process works. Many of you won't ever be able to see it on your side. Okay. So most of you won't be able to see it on your side in the classroom teacher because you wouldn't be in that setting with them. But it gives you kind of an idea how that process works. So you can watch it off of that. And then it's in the 805 resources folder along with the bell curve template form. Okay. Any questions on that? Where to find it if you do indeed need to use it. And if you do, that's fine. That's why we have it in there to help you out because we realize some of you may not have access to those individuals that can do it to administer the test. Okay. Any questions? You won't have any assignment due this Sunday. You get a little breathing room, but don't procrastinate and wait till the last minute and try to start this thing. It'll sneak up on you. Okay. Any questions before we go? No? Everyone good? Glassy eyed? It's been a long day. Okay. If you have questions after tonight and you're not for sure on norm reference test and how to go about doing it, shoot me an email and I will get to you and answer that for you. Okay. You guys have a good evening. Thank you. Take care.